What's up, short attention span history nerds? My name's Mike Perry and you're watching 10 Minute History. Funny man Richard Pryor was a comedic genius. He could say the most benign words and have you in stitches. His take on events, his life, drugs, and racism would have you falling on the floor laughing. His comedy is timeless. As a kid, I had several of his records and I would play them over and over, laughing hysterically. I had to hide my records from my parents and I wouldn't dare play them in the house. What I do remember was running an extension cord from my bedroom out to the furthest part of our backyard and listening to his records out there. My parents hated his style of comedy. I'm not really sure where I got the records actually, considering I was 10 years old, obviously without a job, and my parents wouldn't have bought them. That remains a mystery to me. But enough about me. Let's dive into the life and times of funny man Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor was a groundbreaking comedian and one of the top entertainers of the 1970s and 80s. Now, Pryor was a class clown in school, which often got him into trouble. His class antics were a way for him to deal with his home life, and he had a horrible home life. He was encouraged by his teachers to join school theater in his teens, and from there, Richard Pryor became a successful stand-up comedian, television writer, actor, and producer. Diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1986, he continued to perform for several more years, but sadly he died of a heart attack on December 10th, 2005. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, so let's start at the beginning, the very sad beginning. Richard Pryor was born December 1st, 1940 in Peoria, Illinois. His mother Gertrude was a prostitute, which exposed him to a bevy of miscreant men. His father Leroy was one of those miscreants. He was a bartender, hustler, and boxer who served in the military during World War II, but received a Section 8 discharge for constantly fighting. His father was seldom home to raise young Richard, and his mother abandoned him at the age of 10. Not an ideal situation for a young, impressionable boy. After his mother Gertrude abandoned him, he began to live with his grandmother, who happened to be a madam at a brothel. Poor little Richard, not that little Richard, was abused by many of the men that frequented his grandmother's brothel. This went on for many years, and according to Pryor, the abuse actually began at age 7. To get away from his horrible life, Pryor found solace in going to the movies, and he loved comedies, especially the physical comedians like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. At school, Pryor would act out the scenes of the movies to amuse his friends. He went on to discover acting in his early teens and was a natural performer. He was cast in the production of Rumpelstiltskin by Juliet Whittaker, the director of a local community center. And she believed in his talent and encouraged him throughout the years. Unfortunately, Pryor was expelled from school at the age of 14 and ended up working a bunch of crap jobs until he joined the military in 1958. He served in the Army for almost 2 years. Almost all of that time was confiscated to the Army prison for fighting, just like his dad. This eventually led to him being discharged from the Army. When he left the Army, Pryor married Patricia Price in 1960. The couple had one child together before divorcing. After ending his marriage, Pryor pursued a career as an entertainer. He found work as a stand-up comic throughout the Midwest, playing clubs in East St. Louis and Pittsburgh. In 1963, Pryor moved to New York City, the hub of stand-up comedy. The following year, he made his television debut on a variety show called On Broadway Tonight. Guest appearances soon followed on programs like The Merv Griffin Show and The Ed Sullivan Show. At the time, his act was modeled after two comedians that he really admired, Bill Cosby and Dick Gregory. It was a clean observation stand-up, not the stand-up that he became famous for. By the late 1960s, Pryor had landed a few small parts on the big screen, appearing in The Busybody and Wild in the Streets. He also released his first self-titled comedy album around this time. And deep inside, Pryor didn't like what he was doing. The words were not from his heart. He wanted to be more edgy, but wondered if it would kill his budding success. Now, around this time, Pryor even gave marriage another try. He wed Shelley Bonus in 1967. The couple had one child together, a daughter named Elizabeth, before divorcing in 1969. Pryor toured extensively doing his stand-up comedy act. Playing Las Vegas, he served as the opening act for Bobby Darin at the Flamingo Hotel for a time. He reached an interesting turning point when playing at the Aladdin in the late 1960s. Tired of the constraints and limitations on his material, Pryor left the stage and took a break from stand-up. Soon Richard Pryor, famous comedian, would be born. He retreated to Berkeley, California, where he met a variety of counterculture figures, including Black Panther leader Huey P. Newton. Pryor considered for a while joining the Panthers, but knew it would occupy all his time and he would have to give up comedy completely. But at the same time, he was building his material based on the time he spent with them. And in the early 1970s, Pryor scored several successes as an actor and comedian. He earned positive reviews for his supporting role in Billie Holiday's biopic Lady Sings the Blues in 1972, starring Diana Ross. And in 1973, he netted his first Emmy Award nomination, Outstanding Writer Achievement in Comedy Variety, for his work on The Lily Tomlin Show. That following year, Pryor took home his first Emmy, Best Writing in Comedy Variety, for another collaboration with Lily Tomlin, the comedy special Lily, in 1973. Pryor also wrote for such shows as The Flip Wilson Show and Sanford & Son, which starred comedian Red Fox. Fox and Pryor would later collaborate and star in Harlem Nights. Continuing to thrive professionally, Pryor worked with Mel Brooks on the screenplay for the hilarious Western spoof Blazing Saddles. His own work also attracted a lot of attention. Despite its X-rated content, his third comedy album, That Blank Is Crazy, sold extremely well and won the Grammy Award for Best Comedy Record in 1974, a feat he repeated over the next 2 years. Fans of all racial backgrounds were captivated by Pryor's comedy, which consisted of situational and character-driven humor in place of straightforward, straight-laced jokes. He poked fun at the white establishment, homosexuals, and explored the racial divide. In one bit, Pryor described how different the horror film The Exorcist would have been had it featured a black family instead of a white one. Now the joke goes like this. Are you kidding me? There's no way that I could repeat a Richard Pryor joke. Way too many words that would get me demonetized, blocked from ever posting another video, and canceled by the world. We'll just let Richard Pryor be Richard Pryor and tell his own jokes. Let's just say it's incredibly funny and you can find it on YouTube. Moving right along. By the late 1970s, Pryor had a thriving career as a movie actor. He starred in the box office hit Silver Streak in 1976 with Gene Wilder and Jill Claiborne. Pryor went on to play the first Black American NASCAR champion in Greased Lightning with Beau Bridges and Pam Grier. And incidentally, from my research, it's reported that Pam Grier actually taught Pryor how to read. Also, he and Grier were involved off-screen for a while before Pryor married his third wife, Deborah McGuire, in 1977, which, you guessed it, ended in a divorce in 1979. I'm starting to see a pattern here of 2-year marriages. Off-screen and off-stage, Pryor had a long public history with substance abuse and stormy relations. He also got into a little legal trouble in the early 1970s for failing to file tax returns from 1967 to 1970, and this mistake cost him a fortune. In 1978, Pryor had another run-in with the law when he shot his estranged wife's car. Now, according to Pryor, he bought the car and he officially owned the car, so he had every right to shoot the car. The law didn't see it his way. He was put on probation, fined in order to get psychiatric treatment and make restitution. Now, by the late 1970s, Pryor's health began to take a downward turn. He had his first heart attack in 1978. Doctors labeled it as a mild heart attack, but I bet Richard Pryor didn't see it that way. After his health crisis in 1979, Pryor started work on what has been considered by many critics to be his finest performance, Richard Pryor Live in Concert. Live in Concert received a lot of praise and sold out many urban movie theaters. Soon after this major successful tour, Pryor traveled to Kenya and After meeting with and speaking to a lot of the local people and listening to their heartbreaking stories, he announced to the world that he would no longer be using the N-word in any of his acts. A year after his Kenya trip, Pryor re-teamed with Wilder for the popular crime comedy Crazy, which was directed by Sidney Poitier. The film was a huge hit at the box office, earning more than $100 million, and that's $326 million in 2021 dollars. Unfortunately, Pryor's ongoing drug use spiraled out of control the following year. In June of 1980, after several days of freebasing cocaine, he doused himself in rum, then lit himself on fire in a suicide attempt. Now, this was initially reported as an accident, but he later admitted in his autobiography that he did this on purpose in a drug haze. Pryor suffered third-degree burns on almost 50% of his body. In classic Pryor style, he found humor in his own suffering. You know what I noticed? When you run down the street on fire, people will move out of your way, Pryor said. Richard endured a lengthy recovery and returned to stand-up and acting. He won 2 more Grammy Awards for Best Comedy Recording, one for Rev Do Right in 1981, and one for Live on Sunset Strip in 1982. That happened to be my personal favorite album. Live on Sunset Strip was released as a concert film that same year. Pryor also starred in several films, including 1982's Some Kind of Hero with Margot Kidder and The Toy with Jackie Gleason in 1982. Pryor also found time to marry for the 4th time. He married Jennifer Lee in 1981, but the couple divorced the following year, finally breaking the dreaded curse of 2-year marriages. In 1983, Pryor became one of the highest paid black actors at the time. He took home $4 million to play the antagonist in Superman 3, in which he earned more than the film's star Christopher Reeve. Now, get this, Pryor co-starred in a Superman movie and was paid more than Superman. That's star power. He drew from his own life experience for another important movie called JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling. In the autobiographical film, he played a popular stand-up comic who lies in a coma after a drug-fueled suicide attempt. While in his state, he looks back on his life, drifting off into memories of his troubled childhood. JoJo revisits his youth, recalling his eventual rise to fame and the decadence that followed. As he considers his own existence, he must decide if he wants to go on living or not. In 1986, Pryor was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a disease that affects the central nervous system. He did his best to remain active, starring in movies like Critical Condition, See No Evil, Hear No Evil, and Harlem Nights with Eddie Murphy and Red Fox. And it's been reported that Richard Pryor actually didn't like Eddie Murphy, which really seems odd to me. But I guess just because you have great on-screen chemistry doesn't necessarily mean that you get along off-screen. Now, by the early 1990s, the once kinetic Pryor was confined to a wheelchair. Still, he kept performing stand-up and acting. The comedian wrote his autobiography, Pryor Convictions and Other Life Sentences with Todd Gold, earning critical acclaim upon its release in 1995. That same year, he appeared in a medical drama, Chicago Hope, alongside of his daughter Rain as a man with multiple sclerosis. His last film appearance was in David Lynch's Lost Highway in 1997. Pryor became the first person to receive the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor from the Kennedy Center in 1998. He said at the time, "I'm proud that, like Mark Twain, I've been able to use humor to lessen people's hatred." In 2001, Pryor remarried Jennifer Lee. He spent his final years with her at their California home. Outside of performing, Pryor was an advocate for animal rights and opposed animal testing, and he even established Pryor's Planet, a charity for animals. On December 10th, 2005, the laughter died. It was announced that Richard Pryor had died of a heart attack at a Los Angeles area hospital. Rather than a traditional funeral, Pryor had a certified funeral celebrant. Stories were shared, jokes were told, and Richard Pryor's life was celebrated by friends and fellow comedians. In addition to providing audiences with both hilarious and moving performances, he paved the way for black comedians like Murphy and Chris Rock to make their mark. Pryor started it all. He made the blueprint for the progressive thinking black comedians, unlocking that irreverent style. Comedian and filmmaker Keenan Ivory Wayans explained to the New York Times. In 2016, it was revealed that funny man Tracy Morgan was in talks to star in a biopic of Richard Pryor, with Lee Daniels on board to direct the project. 2 years later, after Quincy Jones raised eyebrows by telling Vulture that Pryor had slept with actor Marlon Brando, Pryor's widow, Jennifer Lee, confirmed that it was true to TMZ, saying Richard would have no shame about Quincy's comments. She explained that Pryor was open about his bisexuality, which he wrote about in diaries, and she aimed to publish. The biopic, however, was promptly canceled. 9 years after Pryor's death in 2014, the biographical book Becoming Richard Pryor by Scott Saul stated that Pryor acknowledged his bisexuality. In 2018, Quincy Jones and Pryor's widow Jennifer Lee claimed that Pryor had a sexual relationship with Marlon Brando and that Pryor was open about his bisexuality with his friends. Pryor's daughter Rain, however, disputed the claim, to which Lee stated that Rain was in denial about her father's bisexuality. Lee later told TMZ in explanation that it was the 1970s. Drugs were good. If you did enough coke, you would blank a radiator and send it flowers in the morning. So maybe someday that biopic will be made. So that's the life and times of Richard Pryor. Love him or hate him, he was one of the funniest comedians to ever walk the planet. I'm curious to know your favorite Pryor movie or joke, or if I missed an important fact about Richard Pryor. I would love to hear them. Leave them in the comments section below. If you like short history videos with sarcasm and humor, consider subscribing to 10 Minute History. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have another 10 minutes to kill, check out one of my other videos. My other ones, especially my earlier videos, are super cringy because I had no idea what I was doing and I did not have editing down at all. Until next time. He also got into a little bit of legal trouble in the 1977. He also got into a bit of legal trouble in the early 1970s for filing, not for filing, you don't get into trouble for filing, you get into trouble for failing to file. Pryor also starred in several films, including 1980's 2. Pryor, why can I say this?